Welcome to the 40th CALLERLAB convention in Cary, North Carolina, huh? Okay, welcome to the 41st CALLERLAB convention in Reno, Sparks, Nevada. Today is April 15th. Did you pay your taxes if you were a U.S. citizen? And 2014, and this is the Mentoring Guidelines session. I am Betsy Gotta. I'm the moderator, and the panelist is Markus, who will be somewhere. I know he's here. So, all of you folks are here to find out about the Mentoring Guidelines book. Is that it? Have you? Okay, let me start by asking a couple of questions. And since this session is being recorded, we will need you to pass a microphone around so that we can have you talk into the microphone and say what you're going to do. Roy, are you going to stay, or would you pass the mic for me? So, the Mentoring Guidelines booklet was conceived as an idea because we believe that we know that there are people who do not want to go through the procedure to be a CALLERLAB accredited caller coach. It's a long and difficult procedure, but you're working with other callers, and you want to, sometimes you get started and everything is wonderful, and then you go, where do I go from here? What do I do next? I've taught them most of what I know. They need improvement, but I don't know how to tell them or how to get the point across. What should I do? And from that idea came the Mentoring Guidelines booklet. And one of the really exciting things I find about it, I'm Betsy Gotta, I'm chairman of the Caller Training Committee. One of the really exciting things that I find about it is the fact that it is an international document. Various chapters were written by people who volunteered from various countries in the world. And each person was assigned a subject, and then they created their particular section, and they went out. It came back to us, and we reviewed it. Ron reviewed it. I reviewed it. It was edited by Royce Dent. It went back through revisions. It was then edited by Ed Foote. It went back through revisions. It was then edited by Royce Dent, and then it was approved. So we like to have copies. Well, you may have one. I don't know if you downloaded it. Did you download it recently? Okay, then it's probably still the same copy. But I know that I had given drafts out before, and then of course we did revisions. So now we can go over it, or what I can do is ask you what you want to know, and we'll see what happens. That's why I was hoping for better lighting. This is small print. Yeah, that'd be great. Yes. Okay. Thank you. You see the table of contents starting with a singing call. A lot of the time I know that we have an amateur night, and they pay, people want to come out, they learn the singing call, and they sing it pretty well, and they get a lot of good feedback. And they think, oh, calling's pretty easy. because we give them the positive feedback, and we don't want to discourage them, but then they need to know what other steps they have. So if you go down the table of contents, you can see the different things. I'm going to skip to the back for a minute because I wish to brag a little bit. If you look at the last page, the contributors, you can see the people who wrote different parts of this. And what we did was, they may have written different chapters, but it's as a whole, it's a CALLERLAB document. So their name is not on the particular chapter that they wrote. We thank them for their contribution, and that was how we put it. Ed Foote didn't want to be put on at all because he said, I only did the editing work. I said, that's major work. So that's why I say it's a truly international document. At this point in time, going to the Appendix 1, we have a certain number of resources. If you folks are working with callers and you have things that you use that should be added to this resource page, I would like to hear from you, because I know that it's probably incomplete. I just want to know what we need to add.
Meg Ferguson, Saratoga, California. I was just curious if you're working with the mentor. I'm a partner, or if my husband were mentoring someone, about how much of a time commitment is there in terms of weeks, months, or daily, weekly,
Turn me on. Okay, that basically is between the mentor and the mentee. I think I made up a word. The mentor and the new caller. I think that, they can work out a schedule. It partly depends upon how close they are. And I mean physically close. If you're working with somebody who's an hour or so away, it may be once every 2 weeks or something like that. And one of the things we have in here is homework worksheets, so that the person who's doing the mentoring can say, okay, we've reached this plateau, and before we come back, I want you to complete these worksheets and work on this on your own. So it's a personal thing. There is no recommended guideline. It could be once a week. I remember John Kaltenthaler, who was part of the start of this. He worked with a person, and they were very close. They lived very close. So Larry went with John everywhere for a while he was watching and observing John, and then John gave him things to do, and then he went on, and and then Larry started doing things independently. I worked with a young man many, many years ago now. He's got his 25-year pin, and we used to have a class at Rutgers University, and we asked the class to stay for half an hour after the square dance class. We asked for volunteers to stay for another half hour, and we used that once a week time for me to work with him and give him practice calling. So it can be worked out between the person who's mentoring and the new caller. That would be what I would say. There's no finite time. Questions? Down in front.
Jeff Palmer, Colorado Springs. I think the important thing about the time is, at least what I've ran into, is don't let it go too long in between, because they'll forget everything that they've done. It's hard sometimes with time, and you're calling your dances and getting dancers together sometimes and stuff is very difficult. But if you stretch out too long a time, you about have to start all over again. So set up some kind of a time. And I like the homework stuff that's in here. That's really some good stuff. When you don't have time, it gives them something to do.
Right.
It's very good.
And one of the things that you can do is, as I said, you can, if they're close and they have the time, you're busy calling, they can come along and observe, and you can perhaps take a time in the break to say, now, did you see how I approached that particular learning problem? That person wasn't getting the call the way I was teaching it, so I changed my words because they have a different learning style. Now, you need to see the chapter on, you need to see about learning styles, and then they can share the chapter that talks about the kinesthetic learning as opposed to the verbal learner or the visual learner, etc. So if they can follow, if the new caller has time, they can come along with the experienced caller and observe, and that's part of the mentoring. They can also fill in a square. Back in the back. I don't think it's on.
Glenn Rayhoff from Olympia, Washington. Yeah, now it's on. Just two comments, Betsy, and this is the first time I've seen this. I knew this document existed, but I hadn't had a chance to get to it. One is, I think I see a lot of the technical aspects of being a caller. Does that make sense? I guess that's the right term I want to use. And there's a whole bunch of non-technical aspects that aren't addressed here that maybe we might think about talking about. The fact that once you become a square dance caller, all your dancers are going to look up to you and how you handle that. That they will look to you as an expert on things and how you handle that. How do you handle the styling or the change in your perception of dancing as a dancer versus a caller? There's all the intangibles, I guess, is a good word for that. That's one comment. The second comment I have is, I'm a little concerned that, and this is not a criticism, it's a suggestion. We've got 2 pages dedicated to teaching when that's probably the most important aspect of training a new caller, teaching him how to teach, him or her how to teach. So maybe we could, I don't know if there's someone who's good at devising, providing, has a resource for talking about things about teaching. Just that my perception, but that's when I work with new callers, those are the 2 things that I really work on. In addition to the mechanical, technical things, there's some other pieces that I think we need to cover.
Well, if you look at the front page, it says mentoring guidelines.
Okay.
It does not say, and I'm not trying to be defensive, I'm simply saying it does not say the be-all, end-all of everything that a mentor needs to know. It is the outline to help you. Hopefully the resource pages in the back would provide some of what you're talking about for teaching. If we don't have it, then that's what we need to put in there. I think I mentioned I thought I mentioned the teaching instructional DVDs, the educational DVDs, especially on on teaching that we've recorded at CALLERLAB in previous years. That would be what I would refer to people to. There's no reason to put that in writing when they can go and listen to one of those if they can get a hold of it, because that's the resource. And the non-tangibles, I would expect that somebody who's a caller understands those non-tangibles and would know to pass them on. I could be wrong, but I don't know if we put that in ethics at all. Ethics is listed, yes. Yeah. Microphone? Pass it back to... Yeah, I was just checking to see if there was anything in the preference. And what was that, Phil? It basically in the business practice and ethics, it refers us to certain things, Bob Osgood, attitudes of a professional caller and stuff like that. And that would cover some of what we're talking about. And if the mentor looks to that, then they can then pass that on. Other questions or comments? What I'm hoping for is that people who are here are going to be what's the word I want? First, you've got the document, and we want you to talk to other people you know about the document, because there's no use in us producing this document unless we get people who are using it. Here comes Ron. So I passed. If it shuts, is it lock, Roy? Oh, that's cool. Ron has a handout and is passing it out. That's yours. Yep. Catch your breath. So, I understand. Just to fill you in a little bit. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Betsy Gotta. I am the chairman of a caller training committee. I have been calling for going on 52 years, I guess. I stopped counting it. And I am a accredited caller coach. I believe I pretty much taught my first caller school in 1973, just prior to when I got married. I'm all right, Ron. Thank you. And so I'm moderator today, and I had a major hand in some of the writing. I definitely had a major hand in some of the early editing, and then putting in the corrections that the major editors did. So that's what I had to do about this particular document. And I gathered all the volunteers who helped. And I thank them exceedingly much. I'm not sure that's good English, but you understand. So, the vice chairman of Caller Training Committee is Ron Markus, and he is our panelist and has a handout which he has passed out, and he's going to catch his breath and talk with you now.
All right. Close enough. Okay, sorry for being late, gang, but these things happen. I guess Betsy's giving you the document, and there's a whole lot of information in the document. I asked for in our local area from a couple of new callers and a couple of people who have been calling for a while. By a while, I mean 30 or 40 plus years. Their comments, and their comments ranged from "it's way too much" to comments on the mentoring guidelines document, the drafts. It's way too much. It's good because it gives us individual pieces that we can look at. So look at it yourselves. The home office has it, and they do have a copy.
Each
more.
one has a copy.
Oh, everybody here? Okay.
But for the tape, the home office has it. Yes, for the tape, the home office has it. I believe it's on the website at this point in time. Public. Yes. One of the things that the people contributing, several of the people contributing, important thing that they wanted was, if we're making this document for people who are teaching callers and we are attempting to reach out to those people, we don't want to make it so that they can't get a hold of the document. That's counterproductive.
Yeah, you want to teach people to get as many people in the activity as possible, as many callers in the activity as possible. So have it available to as many people as possible in the public area. So anyhow, look it over, and like I asked the people in our own area there in Tucson and Phoenix area, look it over and make comments. This is the first official copy of the document. So if you are of the guidelines, so if you have ideas about we'd like to see this, we'd like to see that, there's too much of this, there's too much of that, then please let us know. The Caller Training Committee put it out. The Caller Training Committee is the chairman and vice chairman are both sitting here, and also the home office, of course, has our email addresses. So if you have any questions at all, we're both caller coaches. So there's an ad in American Square Dance magazine. Our addresses and phone numbers and email addresses are there if you want to get in touch with us, especially concerning this document and the guidelines. Please do so. I just want to let you know I've got this little handout I did. I did a bunch of Googling is basically what it did throughout the internet, and I just went in for started off. The first thing I started off was the definition of a mentor as a wise and trusted counselor or teacher, an influential senior sponsor or supporter, advisor or guide. Senior not necessarily meaning older. Just means that you may have been around a little bit longer than the person you're talking to, so you don't have to be a senior citizen to do this. So it's a counselor. You can be a teacher and a mentor, but I think you need to be one or the other. If you're teaching, teach. If you're mentoring, then it's more like watching over and suggesting and that sort of thing. The mentor has been around a long time. The Greek mythology had a man named Mentor. That's where it came from. The idea of, as it says in the handout, the idea of mentoring is not something that is the brainchild of CALLERLAB, although I'm sure that CALLERLAB would like to take the responsibility to say that we came up with this idea first, but 70% of all Fortune 500 companies do it. My background is in CPA firms, and I research a lot of CPA firms, and not the smaller ones with the one-man show, but the larger firms, the regional firms, certainly the national firms. They all have mentor programs, and they're mentoring juniors to be seniors and seniors to be partners and that sort of thing. So it's been around for a while. Then there's a couple little examples about other people that you may have heard of: Michelangelo, Jewel, Dr. Martin Luther King. Then I went on to this business of mentoring. There's a link in there, and by the way, if any of you would like to have this document with the links in it, just let me know afterwards, and I have the document as an emailable document. It's a Word document, Word 07, I think it is. So if you'd like to have it, you see in the handout there are probably 1, 2, 3, 4 different links to places I found on the internet that had information about mentoring, and the one of them is a link to the first one is the link to a mentoring program put out by a company called Cronus.com, and this is what they do for a living. Is they help companies build mentoring programs, and what I found, and one of the things I found in research and looking all through this is mentoring almost becomes interchangeable or gets lost in mentor, because one is the other and the other is the one. They get lost in each other. So mentoring, as I say here, you would provide support and guidance is what you're going to do, because this is where you're no longer actually teaching. If you go to a caller school, or if you teach a caller school, then you're actually teaching a caller school. Don't do it this way, do it this way. You'd be better off doing this or better off doing that. Whereas with mentoring, it's more providing support to what they're already doing. Obviously, if they're doing it wrong, then you want to say, "Are you sure you want to do it that way?" It's more of a suggestion kind of thing, the way I've approached it anyhow in our home program there in Tucson. Of course, it's a two-way system. I don't know how many people ever actually taught caller schools or taught callers clinics. Do you learn just as much? Yeah, a lot of heads going up and down. Yep. And, every caller schools I've done, I wind up with 2 or 3 pages of notes of things that they came up with, that the students who paid for the school came up with, and the same with the mentoring program. You say, "Oh yeah," and you get to thinking about it, and they come up with just as much as you do, and so. And that's kind of the two-way system, or the two-way street of the mentoring program. Then the next one is a link to mentors in general, what mentors do. And as I say, they're unlike teachers. They're actually you'll have a personal relationship with your mentor, and that goes up to the top where I talked about Jewel. I think it talks about Jewel and Whitney Houston. Both their mentors were their mothers, so you can have a very personal relationship. Not necessarily that personal, but you can have a personal relationship with that person. You are their role model. This is somebody they want to look up to. As to I want to, not that they want to be like you, because there's only one you, so they need to be them. And you, as a mentor, you need to coach them and mentor them to let them know that you don't be me. If you like what I do, that's fine. You can borrow it. You can research it, make it your own, whatever the case may be. But you are you, and figure out who you are as a caller coach or as a caller. But don't try to be me. Don't try to be anybody else but yourself. And mentors need to guide people in that direction. You do well at this. You don't do well at this. Let's talk about this some more. That kind of guidance, and you need to be honest with them, certainly. Like I just said. If they don't do well in an area, then you need to let them know. Whether it's a school environment or it's a mentoring environment, you're one-on-one. Generally, mentoring is going to be one-on-one or 2 or 3 or 4. You're not going to have 30 people in the room, and you're going to. I think if you have 30 people in the room, you probably aren't mentoring. You're more like teaching. It's this sort of thing. So, but mentoring is what we do. Is what we've done at home is we did a school. Which was a formal school. We did it over 5 weekends 2 years ago. And since then, we've had 4 or 5 times a year, depending on how often we can schedule it. And, of course, it's only done in the winter, from like September, October, through to about April in Tucson, because nobody's there in the summer. For all, the reason why. So we'll have 4 or 5 sessions a year on a Saturday afternoon of about 4 hours each. And these are actually, they're mentoring sessions. They're not school sessions anymore. We've had a school, so now we're doing mentoring, and I'll do some of the sessions. I have other callers from Tucson, help me out as caller coaches. But that's one way you can do it in your home area. If you want to start a mentoring program, that's one way you can do it. You could do it. The reason we do it on 4 or 5 times a year on a Saturday like that is because there are other meetings that are also done on that same day. Instead of having people come in 2 or 3 or 4 times, because some people are coming from 70 or 80 miles away. So we said instead of having people come in 2 or 3 or 4 times in a month, we'll have everybody come in at one time, and maybe it'll hang over till Sunday. But we'll have a callers association meeting. We'll have the mentoring session. There'll be a dance that night, and the callers who are who went to the school, the newer callers mostly, are the ones who call that evening dance. So we kind of do it all in at one time. Get it all done that day, and then a month or 2 later we'll come back and do it all again. So let's see, what else I want to say. Oh, the things you need to be as a mentor. The last paragraph on the handout. You need to have wisdom, knowledge, experience, amiability, and the patience to nurture a newcomer. Patience, I suppose, is a real virtue here. Wisdom, wisdom just comes with being around the block, having gone around the block a time or two. Having called for yourself And I don't think there's any number of years. You can't be a mentor unless you're qualified for 25 years. I don't. That probably isn't. There's nothing. There's no number that I think anybody would even try to put on. You could mentor a new caller if you've been calling for 10 years, and somebody comes up to you and says, and you say you're calling for a club and you've taught some classes, and somebody comes up to you and says, I'd like to try this calling thing. Well, okay, you could work with them. And if you feel comfortable with them and they feel comfortable with you, they have chosen you maybe as their role model, then go for it. If you've been, and even if it's less than that, if you're calling 5 and they come up to you, is there any number? I don't know if anybody want to put a number on it. It's just as long as you're comfortable at working with another caller and you feel as though you can impart your knowledge, wisdom, information, the experience that you've gained over whatever the number of years, whether it's 5 or 10 or 40 or 52 as the case may be. So, go ahead.
Just to add, Ron was saying about you need to give feedback about what people are not so good at. You also need to give them a way to fix it. That's one of the things that a mentor does. When we were doing this particular document, some of the people involved looked at some of the chapters and said, I'm just going to move over. Trevor's hiding. They looked at some of the chapters and said, these are too difficult. The callers I know can't do them. And my thought was, perhaps the mentor can also gain some experiences as they're mentoring somebody new. They can also improve their own skills. And that would be one of my hopes. And I left a lot of stuff in that some people said was too difficult because I was hoping that the existing callers would take this to heart and say, I should be doing this too.
I think finally the business of if you want to be a mentor, what do you need to know if you want to be a mentor type of thing in this last paragraph. The thing to do is to look at yourself and look at how you feel about doing this kind of thing, about being a mentor to a newer caller. Say to yourself, do I have an interest in helping others? Can I think outside the box? Do I have a desire to motivate people? Because these are things mentors should be able to do. You should be able to motivate or try to motivate as best you can. And at least if you have an interest in motivating. Do you have an interest in what was the first term we used? Helping, just basically helping other people. Do you have an understanding of the culture shared? In other words, you should have a fairly good understanding, and probably a better understanding of the whole business of square dance calling, and everything that goes into it. You need to have. Do you have a better understanding of square dance calling and everything that goes into it, more so than the person you're mentoring? Because your wisdom and experience is going to be passed on to this person you're mentoring, so you need to know a little bit more than them. I'm not suggesting that you lord it over them. I know more than you do. Ha ha ha. You don't want to approach it from that kind of angle, but you do know more than they do, hopefully, and or you wouldn't be doing it in the first place. So and be willing to impart that information. There's another link on here, and this one is from the Journal of Accountancy in November of 2010. It was an article in there that was published by a firm, I think, that had their own mentoring program, and they had the mentoring program for some time, and they came up with I think the title of the article was "How to Be a Better Mentor," and there is a link on there. And if you want, let me know after this, or send me an email, and make sure you have my email address. I'll send you this document with the links directly in it, so you don't type all this stuff in if you don't want to. So it says at the very first part, the mentor's job is to foster one-on-one relationships that challenge people. So that it's very important that's the understanding you have of what you're doing as a mentor. It's a one-on-one thing, or a one-on-two, or a one-on-three, one-on-four type of thing that you're going to do. You're going to challenge these people. Maybe they have already been to a caller school. They've been to clinics and seminars and one-day things in your area or some other area. They've been to a national convention. They've been to the school there. So they've already been taught. Now you're going to work with what they have been taught, and you're going to challenge them to maybe take it to the next step with more challenging things than they've already done. They already feel like they're pretty good at understanding individual calls. Then you might talk about visualizing formations. And I say that because exactly what we've been doing over the past couple of mentoring sessions at home in Tucson is having them work on visualizing formations. And what I told them was, you have one call coming out the mouth, one call is about here, and the other call is further back here. And as one goes, it's replaced with another one. So there's always a rotating three. And they've all kind of got this idea that, oh, yeah, because they thought, I'll call, then look and call, and that doesn't work. So you have to be able to challenge them with that kind of thing. How many calls have you got in your head at one time? Rather than telling them how many they should have, because they know how many they should have. They learned that in the school. So wait a minute, how many have you got there? And I try to approach the mentoring that I've been doing at home with questions for them. Like the question I just asked. How many calls did you have that you're going to be working at the same time? You have one that you're going to throw out and then look, and then another. How many are you going to be doing? And ask questions like that. Challenge them with questions that'll help expand their knowledge. And of course, you need to be connected. You need to know who they are, and what their needs are, and how they learn. People learn in at least 3 or 4 different ways. How do they learn? Do they have to be shown? Do they have to hear it? Do they have to see it? Or a combination? So challenging them, and my own personal style is to challenge people with a question. If they ask me a question, I'll ask them a question back. I don't want to give them, especially in that situation. If it's a school, I may be answering a question is certainly appropriate in a school, but I think in a mentoring situation, and what I've tried to do myself with my own personal mentoring style, is if they ask me a question, I'll ask them another question back, because I think they probably have the answer. The person probably has the answer, or the group probably has the answer to the question they're looking for, but they need to think about it a little bit more. So if a question comes at me, I'll ask them a question back rather than giving the answer. And I think that's the thing that a mentor needs to do is to be, rather than, you've already taught them in a school, you've already taught them how to do something, or they've gone to other schools or other academic sort of things, and they have learned how to do it. Maybe they just don't know they know how to do it. So if they ask you how to do something, or how do we handle this, how do we handle that, then my own personal style, I think it's a successful style, has been going back to them with a question rather than with an answer, because then they wind up answering their own questions and they realize, I know how to do this, and they gain a lot more confidence in their own style. And on the handout, last but not least, tips on selecting a mentor. In other words, if you are a newer caller and you are looking for a mentor, I don't know how many callers how many people in this room, or how many people in your own organizations or areas at home might be thinking about calling, and they say, well, I'm thinking about, I really like to maybe get into this, and I'd like to give it a try, and but I don't know how to start. Well, one of the ways to start is, again, in this is an article from the Wall Street Journal. This one is how to select a mentor. Now, you put yourself in just for a minute in your shoes. You've been dancing for 5 years, mainstream plus whatever you're dancing, and you say, I'd like to try this calling thing. This, I could probably do that. I had a lot of background in music, and I understand, so I have a lot of background in I play an instrument, so I could probably, I'd like to try it just to see what it's all about. Well, put yourself in that person's shoes, and then say, and the next question that comes to mind is, well, how do I pick somebody to help me? Do I just go to anybody? So the person there would just what do you want out of a mentor? You already know about music, so you don't need to learn about music. Do you want that mentor to teach you everything there is about calling? Not that that mentor necessarily would know everything there is about calling, but what would you like to gain? Do you want to become a club caller, or do you not know what you want to do? Maybe you just don't know what you want to do. You'd like to try this calling thing. I think the thing to do there would be to find somebody that you have as a friend, a caller who's a friend. And again, you're standing now in the shoes of the person who would like to maybe try this calling thing, so armed. Then once you take a look at that, you know, and if you have specific goals, okay, I'd like to learn to call singing calls, and I guess which is what a lot of people say because that's what they think, that's what they hear a lot of, and they say this seems to be kind of fun to do. We like to do singing calls, so I want to learn to do that. So then you maybe find somebody in your area who does singing calls very well. And maybe you would approach them and say, I'd like to try this, quote, calling thing, and I think I'd like to start with singing calls. Or maybe I'd like to try to start this patter thing, because it looks like I like the puzzle solving thing. So maybe I'd like to try calling patter. So find somebody in your area, a caller in your area, who calls that sort of thing, who calls singing calls the way you like them. You enjoy dancing to that person's calling for singing calls. You enjoy dancing to the patterns, the choreography that person puts together. Go to them, and if they're willing, and you feel comfortable and friendly, and with these people, with that particular person, then that person could start out being your mentor. Now, maybe as time goes on, that person will say, you need more than I can give you. You've come so far. I'm going to pass you along because so-and-so and so-and-so over here is better at this than I am. So if you have anybody who comes to you in your area that says, I want to try this, quote, calling thing, then this may be a good place to send them, to this Wall Street Journal article or to the handout itself, and say, look at this yourself and see, kind of examine yourself. What do you want to get out of it? Do you want to be a singing call person? Do you want to be a patter person? Or do you maybe just not know what you want to do? You just want to try this calling thing, and move on from there. It's if they have some kind of goal as to what they're looking for, then that would be great. Very often, people just want to try calling and see what it's like. Sometimes after they get into it, they decide, this is not what I want to do. Moving along.
Yeah, if I may interject. This is loud.
Absolutely.
No, you're fine.
Leave it on?
No, I'm fine. Okay. One of the things we want you to do, and I'd like to find out, no offense, but I want to find out why you're here, what you're hoping to get. But Glenn gave me some feedback already, and I said something that may have seemed like I was negating that feedback, and the answer is no. My brain's already trying to figure out how to put some of that in. It may be in the appendix about changes in your life that becoming a caller will make. And, there's possibly a way to do that. Obviously, no offense to anybody, we want to hear your feedback, but I'm not going to have the whole thing rewritten. If you want the whole thing rewritten, I've got a job for you. I know where you live, Phil.
Get right there, don't you move.
But seriously, what we want to do is get this book out to people who are working with callers, or this booklet, whatever you want to consider it, this document out to people who are working with callers, and get the feedback from them as to what is helping, what isn't helping. And the other thing is we picked an order for the chapters, but there's no reason why you have to use them in that order. I had to pick an order. I started with the singing calls because I know where that's where a lot of people start, plain and simple. Can't start with microphone and presentation techniques because they got nothing to say, or very little. It's like, hello, my name is George and I want to be a caller. Other than that, they stand there and go, what do I say now? So I tried to, as the organizer of the things, I tried to pick a logical way of organizing the material. But that doesn't mean you have to stick with it. So I'd like to pass the... Ron, you've pretty much said what you were hoping to say. What I'd like to see is...
Unless somebody has any specific questions about anything in the handout, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, but read it, but accept it for the next minute or two. But if you have any questions, then look at the handout. And email addresses are available. If you want the copy emailed to you that has the links in it to the different articles that are noted in here, then let me know, and I'll just give me your email address, and I'll email it to you directly. All right, back to Betsy.
What I'd like to do would be to have you kind of give us some information about what you're hoping to get from this document, what you want to do with it, and anything else that we can help with. Here, Ron.
I need to stand and walk in here. Who you are and where you're from.
Glenn Rahoff from Olympia, Washington. Myself and another fellow caller in the Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, Washington area are starting to realize that we're not going to be able to do this the rest of our normal lives, and that we have nobody behind us, and we don't have really anyone that are beating down our doors to learn how to be a caller. So we're going to try to energize some interest amongst the current group of dancers as well as some of the current group of callers to go back and do some revisiting about caller training. I've trained callers before and mentored callers before, as well as my partner, and we've talked about, so this document is perfect. This is exactly what we've been looking for, because there's the CALLERLAB curriculum guidelines, but it's monstrous.
Huge is the word, yes.
Yeah, and it's almost overwhelming. But I can see just scanning through this, I can see taking bits and pieces of this, because I know when I was trained as a caller 38 years ago, I was given a book with stuff in it. You got to have stuff. You just can't, so that you got things to read and things to do, and that's part of the learning process. So from that regard, that's how we plan to use it. We're going to start in the fall and teach, and see how it goes. And I'll certainly give you some feedback as we progress.
Super.
Yeah, if any of you have mentoring programs that you get involved in, or that you start on your own, once you get into them and you have a success or not, either way, let us know. The caller training committee is the one that put this out, and we are the caller training committee. We're the chairman and vice chairman of the caller training committee, but let us know, because that's where the changes will be made. If there's enough people that say this doesn't work, it's in the book, we tried it, it doesn't work, it's something, or this works, but if you put this in, it'll work even better, then let us know. We've got to have feedback. That was the feedback I asked for from our own home area. Is it too much? Is it not enough? If it's too much, what's too much? If it's not enough, what do you think should be in there? Those are the 4 questions I asked of the original guidelines drafting that came out. Any other questions or comments from anybody? Come on. Yeah, there we go. Name and where you're from, please.
Trevor Day from Manchester, England. I've come into a slightly different area of mentoring just recently on there, is that I had a person who I class as an instructor because they weren't a caller. They taught the moves to people that is on there, and then they used pre-recorded material for the dancers to dance to. And I take my hat off to them on there, because to manage to get them through all of the mainstream program, I think doing it that way is a lot harder than doing it as a caller. But then they came back to me and said on there, but the amount of material from other than the first standard position for each move is very, very limited. How do I start to create that material, and where can I get it recorded from? No, but it's really only the things that we start off with, like most of the recorded material for the move scoop back has either the boys going in or the girls going in. There's very little recorded material that has a boy and a girl going in. In other words, from normal right-handed ocean waves, on there you've got one boy facing in, one girl facing in. But it's not called all that often on there. And if you're using pre-recorded material, it's very difficult to get that material. And this, I think, will be a very useful tool for me on there, because it's coming at it from a slightly different perspective from where I've come from before, which is to take a brand new dancer, effectively, that wants to become a caller. So it's coming from that different position on there, where they're instructor on there, they know all the definitions and that sort of thing on there, but they've never had the courage to pick up the microphone and actually call to music.
Yeah. If I may interject, there's a gentleman at home, actually in Pennsylvania, who has been to the caller school that I run with Tom Miller, and he has stated that he will never use a singing call. He was one of those people who was instructing with recorded material, and he's still primarily instructing with recorded material, but he's come to caller school and he knows enough to be able to formulate patterns or bring the students back to where they were so that they can go over the material again. And that's as much of calling as he wants to do, but we were able to give him the knowledge to do that so that he could be a better instructor. He works with another man who does sing and is comfortable singing, and therefore Jay does the singing calls. So that they work as a team. But it is, this sort of a document will help the instructor to better able, they can formulate their own patterns and then deliver them without having to use all of the only recorded material. And what they may need from you would be, of course, to help them work through how to formulate them and which step would be more difficult, which combination would be more difficult to the new people who have only had this plain vanilla. But yeah, that's a very good possibility. There's no reason why if they don't want to become a full-fledged caller, if that's not their goal, then they don't need to do that. But they can become a better instructor.
Is there no one in your area who could actually call live and demonstrate the other applications or the other usages of the calls other than what's available on this recorded material that you're talking about? Hold on, I got to get back to Mike. Hold on.
Yeah, this particular club on there started up as a U3A group. It's on there, which is primarily a daytime activity, and most of the callers in our area are young enough that we still have to work. Yes. So therefore, there wasn't really somebody that can go in and help them in that way. The nearest caller that doesn't work on there lives about 90 miles away. And he comes across about once every 6 weeks to help them, to give them the facility to actually dance to a live caller. But most of the rest of the teaching and everything is all done to pre-recorded material.
Doing the best you can with what you got. Who we got? Here we go. Bob, did you have a question? Okay.
Bob Riggs from Centennial, Colorado. That phenomenon of not having a caller and having an instructor has existed for decades around the world. I went over to Bahrain in 1984, and there was a group there that was being taught by someone who wanted to teach square dancing, and they actually had a group, and I ended up calling a dance for them while I was there with none of my own material, of course, but they had a box full of records. This phenomenon of dedicated people who want to teach but are not callers is a phenomenon. Now the question is from a mentoring perspective, can we help them as well as helping callers? And I think that's a question. And I think primarily the focus on this is helping callers to teach and mentoring them. But there's this other opportunity that's potentially out there, and whether it can be addressed or not, I don't know.
My feeling is if there's somebody who can mentor a teacher who does not wish to become a full style caller, as to give it a word, they can still use sections in this book to help them be a better teacher / deliverer of calls, because the teacher, even if they want to stop using pre-recorded material because there is a dearth of it. For those who don't speak English as a natural language, that is a great lack thereof. There's a lack of pre-recorded material because once we had the BMI ASCAP issues, it got very chancy to record your lessons and pass them to somebody else for their use, because now you are violating music laws. So a lot of that which was recorded is no longer around. And so, yeah, I think if you take the sections on patter and choreography and how to develop it, they can still help those individuals. I think Casey was next.
Casey Parker, Manteca, California. Yeah, I came, to this session and to the convention looking for tools, and this is going to be a good tool to use because I have a homegrown mentee that I want to be a positive, additive piece to her journey to be a caller. The downside is that I'm trying to teach an educator, a vocal educator, so I'm just trying to get some tools to make sure that I convey that stuff the way I need to.
And you have, and what's worse is you have a closer than average relationship with this mentee.
Yeah, and the other half is also an educator, so I got to do it right.
Yeah, sometimes the hardest people to talk to teach, or the people that I find the most difficult to deal with, are the people who are already teachers or already musicians. But don't let them. You're still a square dance caller, and you know more about square dancing than they do. So, what do you got? Who are you from?
Phil Farmer, Los Angeles, California. And also, being as a mentor, there's going to be times when you're going to have questions, and don't be afraid to go and get mentoring from someone else. Don't be afraid to go ask questions from other people. I mean, let's face it, we don't know it all. And there's always questions that are going to come up that you're not going to have the answer to. And don't be afraid to go and ask and get the answers, to be able to further your knowledge, plus help the people that are coming to you.
Yep, there we go. All right, way to the back of the room here. Working our way to the back of the room.
Bob Knowles, Tehachapi, California. Part of the problem that I have is just the name of where I live, Tehachapi, California. The first part, I can go to Rod Shuping 45 miles away in Lancaster, or down to Bakersfield if I'm lucky, 45 or 3 hours away to go to Fresno. And one of the things, when I was for a short time living up in the San Francisco Bay Area, our association was not mentoring new callers, and I was just as guilty of it. But one of the things that we needed to do, we were taking these new callers, bringing them into the association, and then saying, "You're a caller, have a nice time." We weren't telling our own new callers, "We need to mentor you." And really, that's where part of that comes from, with the associations not doing that. And then the second part, like I said, you may have somebody that lives far enough away that you don't have that mentoring ability or to get a mentor, except by long-distance relationship. So those are a couple of things that we need to do. Get our associations back in the habit of mentoring. And second, trying to find something like with the Scouts, where they have what they call the Lone Eagle, where you don't have a Boy Scout and they still want to become Eagle Scouts, that you have a mentoring program, and maybe we could even do something like that online.
That would be something to be considered, yes. The online or contact mentoring, yeah.
One more question?
Casey Parker again, just to add to what Phil said, just as a positive, what I have found in this process is definitely that in the mentoring process, it's as much an education for them as for the mentor. I mean, I'm looking at things in entirely different ways and picking up on things that I didn't see before.
Yeah, it's definitely a two-way street. Definitely there. Any other comment? Phil?
Phil Farmer again. Yeah, one of the things is I am past president of a Callers Association, and when I first went into being an officer of the association, one of the first things is they said, Phil, will you run for office? I said, under one condition. I says, at every meeting, when the meeting is officially over, we spend time doing caller education some way or another. We bring callers in that are going to be in town to do special seminars. If there's no caller in town that's available to do that, then we've got enough knowledge in our Callers Association to be able to mentor these newer callers. And we do that at every meeting. There is an educational forum at every Callers Association.
Our local home association. Our local home association, this is Betsy Gotta again, our local home association meets 4 times a year, and we actually have the education session at 9:30 prior to the meeting. So that if the meeting runs long in business, people have already had their education, and if they have to sneak out to go to a job or something like that, they have gotten the valuable education that we hope to offer.
Yeah, that's what I was. Ron Markus again from Tucson. This is what I was talking about. What we're doing here. Finally, at long last, we have newer callers in our area. For a long time, we had no new callers and there was no education. Now we have new callers and the people who were, not that we didn't need education because we'd all been calling for 30 or 40 years, but it just didn't seem to be as important. There were other issues that we were discussing and whatnot else, and then along came these new callers, and we said, aha! So we did a school. And then since then, we've been doing these mentoring sessions 4 or 5 times a year, and it's been very successful. And they get the call that night. It's really been a big success and a blast and a very exciting experience for us at home. And I think you probably would find the same thing. If you have new callers, if you don't have new callers, well, good luck. Get out there and recruit. We ain't getting any younger. Any other comments from anybody? There must be another comment. Fred, you haven't made a comment. You always have something to say, Fred. You don't tell me you don't have nothing to say. Come on. Okay, here you are, Phil.
Phil Farmer, get one more comment. Is yes, and some of our newer members are here at the CALLERLAB convention for their very first time, and they're so excited. Yeah,
yes,
it's great.
That's exciting.
And we push them to come.
Anybody else? Back over here? No? Okay. Yeah, it's kind of exciting when you see, and we have 1 or 2 of our people from Tucson who are here for the first time. They're going, wow, wow, wow. So it's really exciting to see them be excited. So it's kind of fun in that area there. Yeah. How about in Europe? Aren't you the current president of ECTA?
Yes.
Okay. Would you mind introducing yourself on the mic and would you mind if we get some European comments? No. Okay. All right. There we are.
I was honored to be able to attend ECTA last June, and I would love to hear a comment.
Michael Franz from Germany, current ECTA president. Yeah, by the way, you had some European comment because Trevor is from England, which is Europe as well. Yeah, probably they don't like to hear that, but we consider it's Europe, yeah. Well, the ongoing process in terms of what I've heard so far, by presenting some kind of informal learning stuff or educational stuff, ACTA has implemented a kind of ACTA education program, EEP as we call it in short, some 10 years ago now. And it's a multiple step system, and it's not mandatory, but we recommend to be part of it. And by now that system is not really developed to the end, so that means it's an ongoing process in developing that system. But we have, out of something like 5 steps, we have 3 in place. And from my point of view, I'm absolutely in favor of that system. It's one of the cheapest way to send out information, to send out knowledge. Probably, though Europe is, if we have a look at Central Europe, which is probably Germany and the countries around it, probably it's quite smaller than the US, but we also have to face the fact that many people say, well, it's so difficult to go to the places where the ACTA conventions will be take place and where we can have this knowledge. I myself have re-established a kind of roundtable thing in the area where I'm from. Kind of your local caller associations to help sending out this kind of availabilities, really some kind of multiplying opportunities of getting the word spreaded out, and have callers from the area around, give them another opportunity at least 4 times a year of getting this knowledge available as much as we can send out at that dates. So mentoring probably is something that is different, because mentoring really is as it is explained in your handout, Ron, it's some kind of one-on-one. And I myself found myself in a situation that 2 times a caller came up to me, or people came up to me and said, hey, I would want to try it. I really don't know if I can make it, but if there is a chance on trying it, getting to call, how can we do it? Who can be of help? And I myself said, okay, if you would like me in helping you, let's go for it. And the one lady, she somewhat stepped away for family reasons. The other one, someone out of the clubs I'm working for, really has ramped up like a rocket. We worked like 3/4 of a year, and it was at that time he had a 20-minute term every club night, and quite soon, like half a year or 3/4 of a year, I said, well, this 20 minutes, it's far too less for you. You need more. So he really ramped up, and now it's 1.5 years, and he is doing quite well on its own. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for coming out. We've been told that we have to cut our time because there's going to be another session. So we thank you. Go spread the word. Tell people to get a mentoring document. Give it to your local association, and have other people get involved. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for coming. Have a great convention.